Hello and hi dear friends of gartenschlau.com. In this video, it's about the long-awaited culture and care video on the topic of Kalanchoe, or Flaming Käthchen Kalanchoe bosfeldiana. Kalanchoe bosfeldiana owes its name to Robert Hans Bosfeld, who first described this plant. And this plant has something in common with some plants that occur here in Germany, or let's say here in Western Europe. Namely, it is a plant that belongs to the family of succulents. This includes, for example, sedum, things like stone crops, then like house leeks, then echeveria, and crassula, the succulents, or rather succulents, as we also call them here, and these plants occur here with us. You know them from rock gardens. These are the plants that also have nice thick leaves, and logically Kalanchoe also has thick leaves as its most important feature, because Kalanchoe is considered one of the plants that is ideal for everyone who doesn't have a green thumb. Well, my thumb is a bit green again at the moment because I've been playing with soil again. Those who don't play with soil much and like to play with their fingers in soil won't have such green thumbs. They might have cleaner thumbs instead. And this plant is super ideal for everyone who wants to have an unusual plant. After all, it is very attractive with its jagged leaves, and it also blooms beautifully. I will address the topic of how to make Kalanchoe bloom later in this video. First, a few pieces of information about this plant. We have already learned that the plant has relatives here in Europe, or rather with us, here in Germany, Austria and Switzerland. And where does it originate from? Dear Kalanchoe enthusiasts. Not from Europe, no, it originates from Madagascar. You know, Madagascar, here we have Africa, and then we have Madagascar on the side, and that's where the plant comes from. That means it is an ornamental plant that with us is cultivated, but it comes from very, very far away, while we actually have right on our doorstep, for example, also in the Alps, have close relatives of this plant, which are naturally just as attractive and can also bloom beautifully. But we cultivate this plant. Why is the Flaming Käthchen called Flaming Käthchen? Flaming Käthchen, that sounds like fire. That sounds like, if you know fire, like orange, red, like a really beautiful, wonderful, warm flame. And that's exactly where the name comes from, because the original varieties that existed before we had this huge variety of sorts, like we do now, had flowers predominantly in shades of red. And regarding the variety of sorts nowadays, there are now all possible colors in Kalanchoe, except blue. Blue doesn't exist yet. There are white, yellow, orange, dark orange, red, pink, and even flower colors that go into purple. And I'm sure there are many breeders out there who say, okay, if there is a purple flower, purple is a mixed color of red and blue. There could potentially be some blue somewhere. This means that the more breeders engage with this topic, there could potentially be a bluish flower at some point. What temperatures should be maintained for Kalanchoe in terms of care? A standard value of 15 to 20 degrees is assumed. So just as it should be by the window in your home, it is said that it should not exceed 25 degrees. However, if it's 30 degrees outside in the summer and you don't have air conditioning, you can assume that the temperatures in your home are also well above 25 degrees, but your Kalanchoe won't die, or take it badly. At high temperatures, as is the case with many plants, it will simply reduce its activity so that evaporation decreases and the plant can simply withstand the current situation. Temperature ranges below 15 degrees can also be easily endured by the plant. It can even go down to as low as 5 degrees plus for a short period, up to a maximum of 1 week. Theoretically, you can also place it in the refrigerator depending on how your fridge is set and store it there to prevent it from blooming too much. But I guess who actually does that? And normally a refrigerator is set much cooler. Maybe you just use a camping box with a cooling pack inside, but that's all theoretical. And you don't need to do that at home, storing the plant. But theoretically, it can handle these temperatures. Ideally, to make care even easier, you simply put this plant outside in the summer. And now that you know it can withstand 5 degrees, you can leave it outside for quite a while. At least it shouldn't be exposed to frost. 5 degrees are usually the first days before the first frost can actually set in. Therefore, the plant can stay outside for quite a long time. If you repot the plant, then it needs, I would say, almost no additional fertilizer in the first year. Most succulents are relatively easygoing in that regard, meaning you don't have to give much fertilizer. And therefore, as I mentioned at the beginning, this plant is really great for everyone who doesn't have a green thumb. And it will also bloom regularly if you take proper care of it. It shouldn't be kept too wet. Better too dry than too wet, as with all succulents or cacti. Let's move on to the things that most people at home are interested in, because how can I ensure that a Kalanchoe blooms again? And why? Does it happen that if I have a Kalanchoe in the kitchen or on my dining table, it wilts in a very short time, and that we can't enjoy our plants anymore because the bloom disappears so quickly? This one is just starting to bloom with filled flowers. That's also something that needs to be mentioned. There are varieties with single flowers and there are varieties with filled flowers. But let's talk about how to get a Kalanchoe to bloom again. Kalanchoe has a lot in common with the poinsettia. You know, my poinsettia that I showed you in the last video, which is now slowly wilting, it also has similarities. With Kalanchoe, not only that the flower is red, no, a Christmas. A poinsettia requires short days for flower induction. And with the poinsettia, what we perceive as the flower is not actually the flower, it's a pseudo-flower. These bracts, which turn red, require short days to turn red. With Kalanchoe, it's the same. One should pay attention to Kalanchoe if one wants it to bloom. Whether you want it to bloom in the summer, the short day should not exceed 11 hours. Ideally, the plant should receive 8 to 9 hours of light, and when the day is over, after 8 to 9 hours, the plant will eventually start to induce flowers. You should keep it for at least a month, roughly accepted. And that is also the reason why when we buy a Kalanchoe, it has already bloomed in the summer. And then we wonder, when will it ever bloom at all? Many people already have the idea to throw the plant away. It is a perennial plant, can grow up to 30 semipools tall, really beautiful. Mature and branched plants are something wonderful. Because the reason I want to get to is, that's the reason when the plant has finished blooming in the summer. And we think, oh, nothing more will happen. The plant will never bloom again and it's so difficult. No, only in winter, when the days become shorter again, does the plant get the stimulus to form flowers. This means that with normal care, it will tend to bloom in winter for us, simply because the days in winter are shorter than in summer. In summer, of course, we also like it when the days are longer. Then we go to the beer garden, the Kalanchoe. Can't do that now unless we take it with us. And in winter, when we prefer to snuggle up at home, under the blanket because it's already dark outside, it's exactly the same for the Kalanchoe. It also snuggles up in winter and thinks, now I'll start blooming. It's nice, it's winter. Yes. That's the secret with the Kalanchoe, how to get it to bloom. And now to what I have already pointed out. If you place your plant, for example, on the dining table in the kitchen or on the dining table in the living room, and suddenly the plant starts to wither rapidly, and then it can only be because you have a fruit bowl with, for example, apples nearby or in close proximity. Apples are climacteric fruits. Climacteric means that the fruits can ripen further. These fruits emit a ripening gas. Usually this is ethylene. Kalanchoe reacts to this ripening gas by wilting prematurely. This means that the bloom, which could last for days and weeks under ideal conditions, is suddenly over when this ripening gas flows over the plant, and then the plant wilts in no time. Yes. Now comes another interesting point at the end. How can you propagate Kalanchoe yourself? Propagating Kalanchoe is very, very simple, and it can be done both vegetatively and generatively. Vegetatively, through cuttings. This is relatively easy with all thick-leaved or succulent plants. Simply cut and place in soil that is not too wet, and then it will grow relatively quickly. And then, of course, there's also sowing, or if you have a lab, which most people don't have at home, you can also do it in vitro, just like you know from my orchid video. And now comes another interesting point. 1 gram of Kalanchoe seeds contains up to 80,000 hanbo seeds. This is truly fascinating, and in this regard, it also shares us a similarity with orchids, because the seeds in a capsule of orchids are also present in large quantities, and they have a relatively low weight. So unlike a coconut or chestnut or any plants you know that have really nice thick seeds, I hope I've explained everything to you now. If you still have questions about the topic, Kalanchoe and care, definitely not much watering. Feel free to put that in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Definitely subscribe to it, recommend the channel to others. And I would say until the next video, goodbye.